Good afternoon, everybody. I have two slides, maybe three, maybe a little bit more than that. A lot of the things that I'm supposed to cover today, I changed somewhat the topic to focus more on the imperatives for sustainability of animal identification and recording in smallholder farming in Africa. And most of the things that I will point out here have been discussed, and I've had to shorten the presentation as well, and quite a lot of them have been covered by the presenters that came before me. I like what has just been mentioned now about small steps to achieve big things. I will cover that a little bit. This has been covered a lot. What I'm trying to get to is, how do you ensure sustainability? Sustainability is a big word, and when I first got this topic, I Googled it, and then I used an old dictionary and so on. I mean, it's to ensure that this process will go on. And I tried to, perhaps I didn't do much justice on some aspects, but I looked more at how you can ensure that the system is accepted by producers or smallholder farmers, so that it can endure or it can be sustainable. The first thing that we discussed yesterday, I think 2 days now, the issue of involving extensive consultation that is required, that we should be prepared to meet farmers. Sometimes the meetings without end, it takes quite a long time. 15 or so meetings later, you get to an agreement that they agree to implement the system. I always tell people that in the past, veterinarians that served in the past had the convenience of, or the luxury of just telling farmers what to do, when to do it, and how to do it without any questions. You just had to dip your cattle, we are putting a fence here, and that was it. But now the younger vets that are in the field, they are unfortunate because of democracy and so on. 15 or so meetings later, that's when you start getting agreements to implement systems. The reasons for implementing the systems must be very clear. Some presenters before me had to take calculators to try to justify to farmers that this makes sense. The benefits must be glaringly there for producers, particularly smallholder farmers, that often they do not participate further in the value chain. They just present the animals to an auction or present the animals to somebody who buys them, sort of farm gate sales, and they don't participate in the export market with the live animals directly. It's some other people in between who then get to benefit. So the reasons for implementing a system, whether it's performance recording or for traceability purposes, must be very clear. I have been insulted. I have been, well, of course, not. I've been, when we were implementing the systems in places where I've been involved, because sometimes the benefits are very difficult to, they're not very clear to producers from the onset, some much later as you implement the system. But if you can get a reason, as was pointed out by Swaziland, that the key driver was stock theft. So for farmers, if they're told this will curb stock theft and prevent losses, this will reduce death or losses to animal diseases, farmers tend to get along. And quite often, as was pointed out earlier, during a time of a crisis when there is actually a disease going on, but if you tell them we're doing it so that maybe when a disease comes, we will be able to do this. It's a bit far-fetched for producers, both commercial and smallholder farmers to appreciate. So the benefits often have to be substantial for them to get interested. If not, then whether it's in immediate benefits or medium-term, long-term, it becomes increasingly difficult if you tell them in 15 years we are going to reap the benefits. So you may implement this system, but it will have a very limited lifespan. The funding arrangements have to be very clear. The total cost of the system. What are the farmers going to expected to contribute? And in some cases, you might have to introduce a subsidy in order to start up the process, and then later, as happened in other countries where you find producers now buy ear tags on their own without a subsidy, but to kickstart the system, as we were taught by Namibia, the RFID, the electronic ear tags, the government had to support producers, but after a year, producers were on their own. So sometimes you will have to do that. Identification of animals. It is important when yesterday we were talking about selecting the animal identification numbering system. If it's for the purpose of recording, where farmers will be required to notify or to record the animal identification, should be as short as possible. Selecting the method of identification, cost is very important. Producers, the questions they ask is, how easy is it for me to implement this system? How much of my time will it take? How much will it cost me to implement? So cost is pointed out all the time. And the benefits must be, as I pointed out, glaringly there. They don't have to look for calculators, to go through or shuffle lots of papers to justify what the benefits are. And if you are going that way, you might see that things will not, the startup will be very difficult, and perhaps the sustainability as well will wobble a bit. Selecting the identification devices, the tools, different types of tools and equipment was covered yesterday. But for me, the issue mostly is cost of identification devices. If it is selected that if the decision is that animals are going to be either tagged or bolused or some other identification device inserted or applied to them, the cost of branding ions and so on cannot also not be ignored. It can be a significant cost. The convenience of the identification system that has been selected, ease of application, and the multiple uses. If the identification system is only to serve for the purpose of export certification, smallholder farmers who don't participate in the further in the value chain may not see the reason why they have to have their cattle tagged. This may excite auctioneers and others who handle bulk handling of cattle, either at auctions or at collection centers, may be excited about introduction of electronic identification devices, but smallholder farmers, the electronic readers, I think possibly the cheapest is $400, and very few smallholder farmers will be able to afford that for use in identifying animals as they handle their animals. So it has to make sense to a producer. Extensive training, it was pointed out by the last speaker, is very, very important to ensure that you have the extension staff, you have field staff that are in a position to continuously support producers. Application of the identification devices and any other issues related to implementing the system. When it comes to the recording task, often the records are used by agricultural planners or veterinary authorities to certify, and the farmers may not directly benefit from some of the records that they are required to to record. And sometimes you give them a very long, winding explanation on how these records are going to benefit them. For performance recording, that too, it might take a time for people to be convinced to record milk yield. I don't know those that have been involved much in these performance recording by smallholder milk producers. It takes time for them to start appreciating the benefits from it. So sometimes the user of the records may have to go and assist in collecting the records, perhaps in the short term as you start, and then hand over to the producers when they see value in it. The type of records, there must be as simple and as few as possible. Farmers, we were told yesterday, the day before yesterday, their business is to farm. When we introduced a system, some place where I was involved, a farmer came up to me and said, I started farming because I could not read or write. Okay, he was joking, of course. But now you bring all these piles of papers for me. That is not my business. My business is to farm. So we should try as much as possible for smallholder producers to keep it simple and have as few records as possible. Some producers have stock cards in some countries, or stock registers, and quite often they have to wait for a year for animal health technicians or animal health officers to come and make entries there. They don't do it themselves. Whether it's weekly, those that do weekly dipping or fortnightly dipping, they will have to come and do it themselves. The literacy levels with some smallholder farmers, we got a chart presented to us yesterday about the level of literacy of the different smallholder groups on average. Some of us are smallholder farmers, but the majority of them will have challenges to keep lots of records. The frequency of recording is also important. Sometimes we were talking yesterday about internet connectivity. We need the database to be connected to this office, that office. But when you actually look at some of the information, you actually may not, if you record it and capture it once a month, or it will still suffice for the purposes of either disease control or for the purposes of performance recording. Okay, it might be slightly different. But we have to ensure as you start, remember when you're starting a system from the farmers, the system wasn't there. So, as was pointed out, small steps to achieve big things. Don't now look at having everything in place all at once. You do a phased implementation. I'll talk about it just briefly now. Practical training, again, it should be ongoing. The things that I point out are just obvious things that will ensure that producers, starting from the benefits and supporting them in ensuring that you put a simple system, if they are to participate in recording, whether it's notifying animal movements, recording births, deaths, and any animal event such as vaccination or treatment with one or other drug, you will have to make it as simple as possible from the beginning and gradually scale it up as farmers gain confidence in dealing with the system. Practical training should be ongoing. The implementation, we need to involve smallholder farmers. Quite often, in some, as I pointed out, veterinary authorities impose systems, or others say, this is what you have to do. We have to involve them so that they become part of the process, either in designing the animal identification, the numbering system, and the recording system. What type of records, what type of forms should be used. Integrating existing systems as much as possible, and also progressive implementation of requirements. To start off with maybe just identifying the animals and then gradually recording this record and that record. I know that you may have deadlines to meet some of the requirements, which may be challenging, but then in often some of the cases, field staff from the Ministry of Agriculture or other will have to support with collection of some of the The enforcement strategies should start to avoid resentment and resistance, should start off more educational. I know that is a challenge in some areas to start slow and then at some point tell farmers you have to comply. If you don't do this, you will not participate in either marketing animals or you will be penalized. But I think enforcement strategies would be good if you have the time to gradually implement these penalties if they have to be there, but the enforcement strategies must be more educational to avoid resistance and resentment. This is just a summary that the needs must be compelling. If not, you might have to support smallholder farmers to implement the system by having field staff do stuff that farmers are supposed to do. Participation in designing the system must be affordable or cost-effective, as was pointed out, and it must be simple and integrated with existing systems. First, implementation, small steps to achieve big things, and then ongoing support is important for producers. Thank you.